What if a single papal announcement in the year 1300 caused such a massive response that it literally transformed Rome overnight? We're talking about crowds so enormous that chroniclers couldn't believe their own eyes. And the numbers are absolutely staggering. But here's the twist that will blow your mind. This pope wasn't even supposed to make this decision. The idea came from elderly Romans with mysterious family stories about something that may never have actually happened. Yet from this uncertain beginning, Pope Boniface VIII launched a tradition so powerful that it's still drawing millions to Rome today, over 700 years later. Today's episode dives deep into one of the most fascinating episodes in Catholic history. Stay tuned because there are incredible details that'll make you see the medieval church in a completely new light, including a shocking economic revelation that even historians find surprising when they discover it. Picture this scene, and consider whether it doesn't sound like something out of a fantasy novel. It's 1300, and the roads leading to Rome are clogged with an endless stream of humanity. Farmers have abandoned their fields, merchants have closed their shops, and entire families are risking everything on the most dangerous journey of their lives. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. Most of these people had never traveled more than 20 miles from home in their entire lives. Yet something was so compelling about what they'd heard that they were willing to walk for months through bandit-infested territories. What could possibly motivate such an unprecedented migration? The answer lies with one of the most controversial popes in history. And when you learn about Boniface VIII, you'll understand why he was either loved or absolutely despised, with no middle ground. This man had the kind of personality that changed the course of history, and the Jubilee Year was just the beginning of his dramatic story. But before we get to the Pope himself, imagine a world where news traveled at the speed of a horse, where most people couldn't read, and where the idea of forgiveness for a lifetime of sins seemed almost too good to be true. And here's a question that has fascinated historians for centuries. How did word of the Jubilee spread so fast across Europe without any mass communication? The answer involves an underground network that's going to surprise viewers, but that secret will be revealed in just a few minutes. Now here's where this story gets really intriguing, and you've probably never heard it told this way before. The first Jubilee didn't start with theological scholars debating in Vatican halls or cardinals presenting carefully crafted proposals. No, it started with old people telling stories. Picture this. A group of elderly Romans approached the most powerful man in Christendom with what amounts to family folklore. They're telling Pope Boniface VIII about memories passed down from their grandparents. Stories about some kind of incredible celebration of forgiveness that supposedly happened around 1200. But here's the kicker. Historians today aren't even sure this earlier event actually happened. We might be looking at the most successful case of telephone game in history, where a possibly fictional memory launched a tradition that's lasted over 7 centuries. Isn't that absolutely fascinating? Boniface VIII could have dismissed these stories. Any reasonable person might have. But this pope, and you'll see why his personality was so crucial, saw something bigger. He recognized that whether the stories were true or not, they revealed something profound about what people desperately wanted: a chance for complete spiritual renewal. And what happened next changed everything. On February 22, 1300, Boniface issued a papal bull that would make him either the most brilliant or the most reckless pope of his era. But which was it? Well, the results speak for themselves, and those results are going to shock you. Stay tuned. The papal bull, Antiquorum habet fida relatio, didn't just offer forgiveness. It offered something that medieval people considered almost impossible to obtain: complete and total remission of temporal punishment for sin. In modern terms, think of it as a get-out-of-purgatory-free card. But wait, it gets better. The requirements were surprisingly achievable. Romans had to visit St. Peter's and St. Paul outside the walls for 30 days. Visitors from outside Rome? Just 15 days. Compare that to a crusade, which could take years and might cost you your life. Here's what's absolutely brilliant about Boniface's strategy, and this is why historians consider him a genius. He made the grace extraordinary, but the requirements accessible. He created urgency by limiting it to the year 1300, but he made it possible for ordinary people to participate. And the response? The accounts that follow are so unbelievable that historians spent centuries trying to verify them. But the evidence keeps confirming the same incredible conclusion. The numbers are staggering, and they prove just how desperate medieval people were for spiritual renewal. Giovanni Villani, who was actually there, estimated that Rome had over 200,000 pilgrims present at any given moment throughout 1300. That means millions visited during the year. But here's the part that really captures the imagination. This wasn't just about wealthy nobles. Records show peasants selling everything they owned, entire villages pooling resources to send representatives, people walking barefoot across Europe. The democratization of salvation had never been attempted on this scale. If you are still with me, hit that subscribe button and do not go away. You will learn the incredible human drama that happened. Now, imagine Rome in 1300, a city of maybe 50,000 people, suddenly hosting 4 times that number continuously. The logistics were a nightmare, but the human stories are absolutely captivating. People were sleeping everywhere, in churches and the streets, packed into every available room. Prices went through the roof, but pilgrims kept coming. And here's a detail that really moves the heart. Families were bringing sick relatives, carrying them on stretchers across hundreds of miles, hoping for miraculous healing. The diversity was unprecedented. English peasants met Polish nobles, French merchants traded stories with German craftsmen, Spanish pilgrims shared meals with Norwegian fishermen. In an age where most people never left their villages, Rome became this incredible melting pot of European Christianity. What strikes observers most about this phenomenon is how these people had the same hopes and fears we recognize today. They wanted forgiveness for their mistakes, they worried about their deceased loved ones, they hoped for better lives for their children. The Jubilee gave them something they couldn't find anywhere else: hope on a massive scale. But here's a twist that surprises many. Not everyone was happy about this unprecedented gathering. Some local Romans started complaining about the crowds, the noise, the disruption to their daily lives. Sound familiar? Even in 1300, there were conflicts between locals and tourists. And remember that question about how news spread so fast? Here's the answer. The church had developed an incredible network of monasteries, universities, and cathedral schools across Europe. Monks traveled regularly between institutions, carrying news faster than any government could manage. It was like a medieval internet, and the Jubilee announcement went viral. Type true in the comments below if you are still in this part of the story. We would like to know if our story interests you. Now let's examine the man himself, because understanding Boniface VIII is crucial to appreciating both the brilliance and the controversy of the First Jubilee. This pope was unlike anyone before or since, and his personality shaped this entire story. Born Benedetto te Tani, Boniface was a canon lawyer with an ego the size of St. Peter's Basilica. And that's meant in the most fascinating way possible. He believed absolutely in papal supremacy, not just in spiritual matters, but in temporal ones too. This confidence would eventually destroy him politically, but in 1300, it served him perfectly. What historians find most intriguing about Boniface is how he understood spectacle and symbolism better than any modern marketing executive. The man who could declare himself superior to kings also understood that ordinary people needed accessible paths to salvation. It's this combination of grand vision and practical psychology that made the Jubilee so successful. But here's something that really surprises researchers. Boniface genuinely believed in the spiritual power of what he was offering. This wasn't just a political calculation or a fundraising scheme, though it certainly had those effects. Medieval popes took seriously their role as successors to St. Peter, and Boniface believed he was exercising authority given directly by Christ. His choice of St. Peter's and St. Paul's wasn't random either. Peter represented papal authority and the keys to the kingdom. Paul represented the universal mission to all peoples. Together, they perfectly symbolized what Boniface wanted the Jubilee to accomplish, demonstrating papal power while offering universal salvation. But here's the irony that's almost tragic. The very confidence that made the Jubilee so successful would later bring Boniface into fatal conflict with the King of France. The man who successfully called millions to Rome would die in disgrace just 3 years later. It's a reminder that even the most successful religious innovations come from flawed human beings. Stick with me as we find out the impact of this event. Now, the economic impact of the First Jubilee was absolutely staggering, and it reveals something important about medieval society that most people don't realize. The papal treasury, which had been struggling financially, was suddenly flooded with donations. But here's what's really fascinating. This wasn't just about the church getting rich. The entire Roman economy was transformed virtually overnight. Contemporary sources describe scenes that sound almost unbelievable. Churches reporting donation boxes so full they had to be emptied multiple times daily. Local businesses making more profit in a few months than they'd seen in years. Enterprising Romans becoming wealthy by renting out every available space to pilgrims. But here's the part that really captures attention. Historians might be looking at the first example of large-scale religious tourism in history. The infrastructure developed for the 1300 Jubilee. Improved roads, new inns, better hospitals, expanded churches, served pilgrims for centuries afterward. This economic success proved something revolutionary. Spiritual activities could generate enormous wealth that benefited entire communities. It wasn't just about individual salvation, it was about economic development on a massive scale. And consider this economic model is still working today. Modern Jubilee years bring millions of visitors to Rome, supporting thousands of jobs and generating billions in revenue. Boniface VIII accidentally invented sustainable religious tourism 700 years ago. If you're still in this part of the story, hit that notification bell for future stories from this channel. Now, examining the spiritual significance shows how the Jubilee truly changed Catholic theology and practice forever. The concept of indulgences wasn't new, but Boniface's innovation was making them accessible to ordinary people on an unprecedented scale. Previously, plenary indulgences were mainly available to crusaders, warriors risking their lives in holy war. Suddenly, any faithful Catholic could obtain the same spiritual benefit through pilgrimage and prayer. Here's what's theologically brilliant about this approach. Boniface combined 3 ancient Christian traditions, pilgrimage, penance, and indulgences, into something entirely new. The pilgrimage aspect connected to biblical journeys, like Abraham's calling or the Israelites' exodus. The penance satisfied the medieval understanding of temporal punishment for sin. The indulgence provided the unprecedented grace of complete remission. But perhaps most importantly, the Jubilee demonstrated the universality of Catholic faith in a way nothing had before. When pilgrims from across Europe gathered in Rome, they experienced their local Christianity as part of something truly global and eternal. And this theological innovation had consequences that Boniface never could have imagined. The impact influenced everything from the Protestant Reformation to modern papal travel. Stick with me as we explore how this tradition survived through centuries. Here's where the story gets even more fascinating. Because the Jubilee tradition proved so popular that it couldn't wait a full century for repetition. Boniface had set the interval at 100 years, meaning the next Jubilee wouldn't occur until 1400. Most people alive in 1300 would never see another. But the demand was so overwhelming that Pope Clement VI declared a Jubilee for 1350, just 50 years later. This started a pattern of adaptation that shows how responsive the Church could be to popular needs. Urban VI reduced it to 33 years, Christ's earthly life, and finally Paul II established the 25-year cycle we know today, ensuring most people could experience at least one Jubilee in their lifetime. And here's something that demonstrates continued relevance. The concept keeps evolving even today. Pope Francis called an extraordinary Jubilee of Mercy in 2015-2016, showing that this 700-year-old tradition remains vibrant and relevant. The basic human need for forgiveness and renewal that motivated those medieval pilgrims hasn't changed at all. The tradition survived the Black Death, the Western Schism, the Protestant Reformation, Napoleon, 2 world wars, and the modern secular age. Each Jubilee reflected its historical moment while maintaining continuity with Boniface's original vision. So why has this tradition lasted over 7 centuries? The answer reveals something profound about human nature that resonates regardless of personal faith background. First, Boniface tapped into the universal human desire for fresh starts. Whether someone is a medieval peasant or a modern professional, the idea of wiping the slate clean and beginning again speaks to something deep in the human experience. Second, he found the perfect balance between accessibility and challenge. The Jubilee was open to everyone, but it required real effort and sacrifice. This created a sense of earned transformation that made the experience genuinely meaningful. But here's what moves observers most about this story. Boniface understood that faith is fundamentally communal. The Jubilee brought together people from across the known world, letting them experience their personal beliefs as part of something greater than themselves. In our age of social media and global connection, it's worth remembering how revolutionary this was in 1300. The artistic and architectural legacy is still visible today. Much of Renaissance Rome was funded by Jubilee donations. St. Peter's Basilica, the Sistine Chapel, countless works of art, they all trace back to the economic success of Boniface's innovation. This year is Jubilee 2025. The theme is Pilgrims of Hope, running from December 24, 2024 to January 6, 2026. It invites the faithful worldwide to engage in spiritual renewal through pilgrimages, the opening of holy doors in Rome's major basilicas, and various events emphasizing reconciliation and hope. Whether someone is planning their own pilgrimage or simply reflecting on hope and renewal, they'll be participating in a tradition connecting them to countless faithful across 7 centuries. Isn't it incredible how one pope's bold decision in 1300 created ripple effects that are still transforming lives today? From elderly Romans sharing family stories to millions walking the streets of modern Rome, we see the enduring power of hope, forgiveness, and community. But here's a challenge worth considering. What fresh start traditions could we create in our own lives and communities? How can we apply the lessons of accessibility, challenge, and community that made the Jubilee so successful? What aspect of this story was most surprising? Are there plans to participate in the 2025 Jubilee? What other medieval innovations would be worth exploring? Share thoughts in the comments. Every response helps inspire future episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell, because these deep dives into Catholic history are just getting started. The stories planned ahead will change how you see the Church, the Middle Ages, and maybe even faith journeys in general. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep growing. This is Fedi Plus, and remember, history isn't just about the past, it's about understanding who we are today.